people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
To the mother relay, we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. On the heels of her latest victory this past weekend, unbeaten up-and-comer from Australia, Skye Nicolson conducted a Q&A with the fans via her Instagram stories. One question asked, which card are you likely to be on out of the new show's Matchroom announced? To which Skye replied, I don't have a fight date confirmed. I need to sit down with my team and plan out what's next. This will also depend on whether or not I go back to Australia to qualify for the Paris 2024 Olympics.
And she might. Estelle Mosley's already started on that.
Estelle Mosley, gold medalist from France, having already won the gold once, she means to win it again. She seems to care more about her amateur career than her pro career.
Unbeaten up-and-comer Skye Nicolson might follow suit.
More focused on amateur accolades than professional ones.
Another question that was asked to Skye was thoughts on your performance.
To which she replied, unfortunately, not my best performance. I was up against someone that was very hard to look at against. We knew she would be aggressive, but didn't quite expect what came. I took a lot away from the fight, and my team and I will use it to help me grow and develop into a better fighter.
Contrary to some, I actually viewed the Tania Alvarez fight as a necessary homework assignment, a necessary evil for a pure boxer.
Pure boxer's kryptonite is pressure, working under pressure, and Tania Alvarez, raw and crude as she might be, that's what she is. She's a pressure fighter.
Skye needs to learn how to handle herself against those kinds of fighters.
You got fighters like Amanda Serrano in your crosshairs, and you mean to share the ring with that caliber of fighter, you need to work under pressure. You need to learn to.
Even though Amanda Serrano isn't actually an, according to Hoyle, pressure fighter, she's actually more of a boxer puncher.
A volume puncher, yes, with a hell of an engine and a hell of a work rate, but she's more boxer puncher than pressure fighter. Her fundamentals.
That she can box and punch.
That she's not limited to one particular range. That she's not limited to just coming forward and banging in the booth. That's what tells the story. Better still, Amanda Serrano's volume punching.
To an economic fighter like a Skye Nicolson who only really throws 1 or 2 shots at a time, that can put her under a lot of pressure. She needs to learn how to handle herself in that kind of situation.
A fighter, a boxer puncher, can put Skye Nicolson under a lot of pressure by making that one adjustment, upping the tempo, upping the work rate.
Because that mirrors what the pressure fighter would do.
It's the stylistic advantage that pressure fighters have over pure boxers. Pure boxer wants to slow the fight down, and the pressure fighter won't let them. As a result of that, the pressure fighter often wears out the pure boxer or outworks them. In the case of Skye Nicolson and Tania Alvarez,
Tania's still very raw, still very crude, so there's only so much she can do. She's got the right base style for the job, but she was missing a few ingredients. Amanda Serrano.
Skye Nicolson says she wants to fight the likes of an Amanda Serrano.
Amanda, who's a hell of a lot more experienced than a Tania Alvarez, likely punches a lot harder as well.
Even if she's not an, according to Hoyle, pressure fighter, even if she's not limited to just applying pressure, she can put Skye under a lot of it.
A lot of pressure.
You saw in the fight that Tania Alvarez simply barreling forward, consistently chasing Skye Nicolson, wore on Skye Nicolson's gas tank. After a while, she was breathing with her mouth open, even though she was clearly winning the fight.
If you put Skye Nicolson in there with a pressure fighter of a higher grade, if a Tania Alvarez is, say, a D-plus pressure fighter, put her in there with an Erica Cruz, who's more of a B-plus pressure fighter.
Put her in there with an Erica Cruz and see how she handles the pressure from a pressure fighter of a higher tier, of a higher grade, and it will become that much more obvious what I'm talking about. So these are things that she needs to work on, but if she's contemplating returning to the amateurs,
Puts all of that on hold.
you have to wonder that competing in the pro ranks hasn't soured Skye Nicolson to them, stating, boxing fans and critics are so funny. Shout out to the real and loyal ones, though. I see you.
Skye Nicholson's got a growing community of boo birds that really aren't too fond of her performances. In truth, she's not alone. Pure boxers They've got it rough.
Historically, they've always had it rough. Even some of the very best pure boxers, some of the most skilled pure boxers, like Guillermo Rigondeaux or an Erislandy Lara, like Skye Nicolson, have been accused of being boring.
Action has never really been the pure boxer's calling card. Quite the opposite. They're not action fighters. They characteristically work off of 1 or 2 shots at a time and keep the tempo of a match at a controlled and steady pace.
Slow the tempo of a fight down, fight a safety-first fight safely from the outside. That's Skye Nicolson, and as you can imagine, the bloodthirsty crowd that wants to see an action fight, they don't get a kick out of seeing Skye play it safe. I think the saving grace for Skye is that she's not the only fighter.
She wanted two finesse fighting kind of fighters transition from a amateur style to a more pro style. One among them is Skye Nicholson's countrywoman, Taylor Robertson. She was a real safety finesse fighting kind of fighter in the early goings of her career, but these days she's actually showing more moxie, more spite. The same applies to the United Kingdom's own Amy Timlin, who after suffering her first professional loss to Spain's own Mary Romero, she took some time off, came back a different fighter. More spiteful, mean-spirited one, where before she was more of an outside jabber, these days she can handle herself mid-range to inside. You could say something very similar about Ramla Ali, who in the beginning seemed like a finesse fighting kind of fighter, but after enlisting the aid of Manny Robles, you can see what they've been doing. You can see the difference from her first 2 fights to what kind of fighter she is now. She has a more pro style. So the silver lining for Skye is that the transition, it can be done. Though if she's going back to the amateurs, contemplating going back to the amateurs, that puts all of that on hold. Her development as a full-fledged 10-round fighter. A professional boxer, not an amateur. We heard some really big talk from Skye during fight week about getting her hands on a title. I don't know. We'll see what she decides to do.
Bivol's movement and how he fights and how disciplined he is, I think he has what it takes to be Benavidez.
Canelo wasn't able to do it, sort of the same thing. Do you think you're the right Mexican to beat Bivol?
I've sparred Bivol a lot, so I know what happens in those sparring sessions. So yeah, I can beat him.
You think you're the guy?
I can knock him out.
¿Qué dice al pueblo mexicano que debe venirse el muchacho?
Pues aquí estoy yo estoy listo para pelear a quien sea. Yo estoy listo y lo noqueo a todos también.
Like many PBC fighters, David Benavidez, ahead of his upcoming showdown, his grudge match with Caleb Plant, has a really cool sparring story with a fighter that isn't a PBC fighter, detailing his confidence. He says he sparred Dimitri Bivol before. He's confident he'll knock him out. Based on those sparring sessions, whenever they took place, we don't actually know how many years ago, what amount of time it's been since he actually sparred Dimitri Bivol. Better still, this is not dissimilar from what we see down there with the kids at 135 pounds, Javante Davis and Devin Haney, all of their sparring sessions that took place years ago. Years later, what the hell does it matter? I don't place much emphasis on sparring stories, gym stories, I don't, but these PBC guys, they talk about these sparring sessions like they're real fights under the hot lights, and they're not. If it's not under the hot lights, it doesn't count. And sparring sessions in and of themselves, they're intended to work on things. They're not intended to be full-on fights. There is such a thing as hard sparring. But the thing about hard sparring is you go taking hard shots and big shots in the gym, you're shaving years off your career. You do that for too long, and that's what happens. So young David, ahead of his upcoming pay-per-view with Caleb Plant, has a really cool gym story about Dimitri Bivol. And the thing about that is, Zurdo Ramirez had a really cool gym story about Dimitri Bivol. I heard about it, talked about it here on the channel, how those two guys sparred each other some years prior to their actual fight over there in San Diego. The story was that Zurdo Ramirez actually got the best of Dimitri Bivol, so much so that they had to call the sparring session off early. Left a cookie on his eye. I was made aware of that sparring session ahead of what was the Bivol versus Ramirez fight, and it didn't influence my opinion. I went with Dimitri Bivol to win a points decision, and that's exactly what he did. I have a similar hierarchy of thought when it comes to a Benavidez versus Bivol fight. He'd school him too. He ain't nothing special. Ain't fought nothing special. Ain't done nothing special. Here you are reheating Canelo Alvarez's dinner from late 2021, and you think you're doing something. You're not. Carrying on about sparring sessions that you had with more relevant fighters than the fighter you're about to fight. Dimitri Bivol is a champion. Caleb isn't. Dimitri Bivol has a more solid body of work here today than Caleb Plant ever had. Moreover, Dimitri Bivol is relevant here today, more so than a Caleb Plant. He holds a win over Canelo Alvarez, who knocked out Caleb Plant well over a year before you decided to set foot in the ring with him. This is promotion by way of name association.
If it's anything, it's that.
So let's just cut the fucking crap. You're talking about a Dmitry Bivol fight when we all know that's not who you're about to fight next, or after next, or after that.
You're talking about relevant fighters to help promote your irrelevant fight.
Your pay-per-view, which, excuse me for saying so, given what follows it, is a bit of a tough sell. It's one of what? 4, 5 pay-per-views happening in sequence?
Garcia versus Davis, if they ever get that over the line. Thurman versus Spence.
Wilder versus Ruiz, whenever that's announced. Benavidez versus Plant, in comparison, is hardly the hottest ticket of those box office fights.
Of course he's talking about Dmitry Bivol ahead of this thing.
Because he wants me and you to believe that beating Caleb Plant will lead him to Dmitry Bivol, when this is reality.
Yeah, I feel like I have 4 fights left at the super middleweight. The only reason I stayed along for so long because I wanted to make this fight happen for sure. And then since I'm already there, you know what I mean, I might as well just try to make these other big fights happen. We got Canelo, we got Morrell, Charlo, and then after that, or maybe Andre, Bubba Andre, and then after that, I'm going up to 175. But if I can't get any of those fights made, then I'm going up to 175.
4 to 5 fights to a PBC fighter? That could be anywhere in between 2, 3, maybe even 4 years, because these guys don't fight that often.
David only fought once last year, and Caleb.
He's putting a David Morrell fight,
Right.
a Jamal Charlo fight,
Right.
a Demetrius Andrade fight, and a Canelo fight ahead of a Dmitry Bivol fight. So when I tell you, don't hold your breath.
Guy's full of shit, man.
He just re-signed to the PBC, you know. This is his first fight under the new deal.
This guy's full of shit, man.
When I tell you not to hold your breath for David Benavidez to move up to light heavyweight and share the ring with the likes of a Dmitry Bivol, when I tell you don't hold your breath, don't hold your breath, because you'll asphyxiate.
The guy's just talking to be talking.
He's putting 4 separate bouts, 4 separate fights ahead of that fight. And to a PBC fighter, how long would it take to make those 4 fights?
Look at how long it took to make this one. Canelo wasn't even campaigning as a super middleweight.
2019, when David still had his belt, and Caleb still had his, and they were both unbeaten fighters, unbeaten champions, reigning parallel to each other under the same promotional banner.
Same side of the street, fighting on the same platforms.
2019. Look at how fucking long it took the PBC to finally make the fight and get them both in the ring. Look at how long that took.
How long would it take them to make all those other fights? A Charlo fight, an Andrade fight, a Morrell fight, a Canelo fight.
How long would it take? Because it's taken you guys 3 years in a day.
There were no other platforms of promoters to have to work with. There were no network and promotional politics to have to sift through and work through to make a fight between Caleb and David. They're both PBC fighters. So why the hell did it take 3.5 years?
It shouldn't have, but it did. Believe me when I tell you. Benavidez versus Bivol, that's not a conversation. That's a pipe dream.
David ain't got no intention of moving up to light heavyweight no time soon.
In men's light heavyweight news, it was recently announced that Zurdo Ramirez will be returning to action March 18th opposite the ring's seasoned journeyman, Gabriel Rosado. And needless to say, the fight is not getting rave reviews. I think all of us have a soft spot for Gabe Rosado, who always fights with a ton of heart and leaves it all in the ring.
He's fought everybody. The Charlo brothers, Gennady Golovkin, David Lemieux.
Jaime Munguia, Martin Beret, Bektamir Melakuziev.
He's fought everybody. But it's for that reason that people don't want to see him fight Zurdo Ramirez.
There's a feeling that they could have tried a little harder with the matchmaking, been a little bit more ambitious, got someone for Zurdo.
Somebody better.
Gabriel Rosado sports a professional record of 26 wins with 16 losses, 1 draw, 15 knockouts, having been knocked out 4 times. He's only been knocked out 4 times in 44 professional contests, 44 professional bouts. He's only been knocked out 4 times. And given the kind of guys that he's shared the ring with, that's actually impressive.
He's a tough fucking guy. He's a tough bastard, Gabe Rosado.
He's coming off of 3 consecutive losses. A decision loss to Jaime Munguia in November of 2021. Another decision loss to Shane Mosley Jr. in April of last year. And yet another decision loss to Ali Akhmadov in September of last year. He's coming off of 3 back-to-back losses.
And I know that Zurdo's coming off a loss too. I understand that, though. Zurdo coming off a loss and Gabriel coming off a loss is hardly even terrain. Gabriel's coming off of 3 losses.
And he's got 16 overall. Boxing insider Serafina reacted to the news by saying, "This shit makes me sick. Oscar De La Hoya, Zurdo Ramirez, how do you go from fighting Bivol, who is arguably top 5 pound for pound, to this? What I respect about Marcus Brown is that he only wants top-level opponents. This is what's wrong with boxing."
I think she's advocating for Brown versus Ramirez because she's doing business with Marcus Brown.
Wouldn't surprise me. She's involved in the careers of several fighters, though in truth, it's not a bad suggestion. Brown versus Ramirez, at least to me, seems a more even fight.
It's a better fight than Rosado versus Ramirez.
Yeah, I actually asked Serafina if Marcus Brown is a promotional free agent, because if he is, then he may have the autonomy to take up such a fight. This fight with Zurdo and Gabe, it's not yet registered on BoxRec.
It's all the way out there in March.
There's still plenty of time to sub him out, swap him out. People really don't want to see Zurdo Ramirez in there with Gabe Rosado.
Not a knock on Gabe, I'm just being honest. Marcus Brown, he sports a professional record of 24 wins with 2 losses, no draws, 16 knockouts, having only ever been knocked out once.
Suffered his first professional loss to Jean Pascal, that shock upset loss, and more recently, he made his world title run opposite the ring, Artur Beterbiev. That was in December of 2021, well over a year ago. Well over a year later, he hasn't fought.
Guy needs a fight.
If he's a free agent, and he's not with the PBC anymore, and why would he be? The PBC has no stock in the men's light heavyweight division. Marcus Brown was really the only pony they had in that light heavyweight show.
If he's a free agent, why don't you swap out Gabe Rosado and use him? And if it's too late to do that...
Okay, all right. You do the fight between him and Zurdo afterwards, because Golden Boy Promotions, they ain't got much to offer any light heavyweight.
No champions, no contenders.
Just Zurdo Ramirez. That's the unfortunate situation they're in. They ain't got that many in-house bodies to do in-house fights for Zurdo Ramirez, so why not pick up Marcus Brown? He's not doing anything.
I hardly think Zurdo Ramirez's only fight this year is going to be opposite the ring, Gabriel Rosado.
I understand that Zurdo Ramirez needs a rebound fight, an easy one, to get himself back in the winner's bracket. Perhaps you can do the same for Marcus Brown and see about building a fight between Zurdo and Marcus. Do that later on this year.
Zurdo, who sports a professional record of 44 wins with 1 loss, just 1 loss, no draws, 30 knockouts, having never been knocked out.
After the Bivol loss, there was a feeling that Zurdo Ramirez might move up in weight, might move up to cruiserweight, but based on him fighting Gabriel Rosado, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that he's probably going to stay at light heavyweight a little while longer. And while he's there, you can do a fight between him and U.S. Olympian Marcus Brown. Marcus is a southpaw, and so is Zurdo.
That's what Zurdo means in Spanish. Zurdo.
They could do a lot worse than pick up Marcus Brown at this point. They need the bodies.
The world title picture is congested. All the alphabet titles are all tied up. You just suffered your first professional loss.
You're on the bounce. You're going to need a couple of fights before you get back into world title contention.
I don't know if Zurdo's actually going to go up the cruiserweight.
All things considered, I think Serafina's proposition, her suggestion that Zurdo should be fighting someone like a Marcus Brown, it really isn't a bad idea.